Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us today for our session. On today's webinar, we're going to discuss how financial technology companies can begin to leverage modern cloud-based custodial data APIs to not only expand platform capabilities, but be able to just enhance overall development and build faster and build more within their platforms and systems. So thank you so much for joining us, and we're super excited to have you today. Before we get into the content, just wanted to overview some of the key points that we'll be going over on today's 45-minute session. So we're going to start off with some introductions to our panelists. After that, we'll do a brief overview into BridgeFT and the WealthTech API product and what we are bringing to the table today. After that, we'll dive into a discussion around data challenges that financial technology companies are facing in terms of financial or custodial feeds. After that, we'll go into a discussion around pros and cons of taking a build versus buy approach to combating these challenges that we will have previously outlined. Lastly, super excited to delve into several different examples and use cases for the WealthTech API. We will discuss those with you guys. And then lastly, I did want to let everyone know that there will be a question and answer session at the end of the call. So as we're going through content, if anything is popping up, go ahead and just use the questions tool right there in the GoToWebinar kind of module you see on your screen, and we will get to all of those questions at the end of the presentation. One more housekeeping thing is that the recording of the webinar will be provided to everyone via email following the presentation, so that will be available to you as well. So without further ado, I am super excited to introduce our awesome panelists today. I'd like to start by welcoming Eric. Eric, would you tell the audience a little bit about your background?
Sure. So my name is Eric Seafried, the API product manager for BridgeFT. I've been in integrations with back offices, dealing with custodial data for better part of 25 years. And with Bridge, my role specifically is a solutions architect, and I play a developer advocacy role, helping both our internal developers and our client developers sort of bridge gap between the APIs and their use cases, as well as helping our sales department.
Great, thanks so much, Eric. Super excited to have you on today to share some of your thoughts here. So also really excited to welcome my colleague, Dave. Dave, would you tell the audience a little bit about your background?
Sure, happy to do it. And good afternoon, everybody, and I guess morning for some other folks as well. And thanks for joining today's webinar. So my name is Dave Hagan. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer here at BridgeFT. I've been in the FinTech space now for a little over 25 years, most recently as the head of digital strategy and integration for Goldman Sachs's RIA custody business. Joined BridgeFT to lead sales, marketing, and partnerships almost a year ago now, and excited to share sort of our latest happenings and answer questions at the end as well.
Great, thanks so much. And that being said, Dave, would you kick us off with just a little bit of background on BridgeFT?
Happy to do it, and then I'll kind of go through a few of these slides and just kind of walk everybody through some interesting developments as well. But I thought I'd kick it off just really just to point out, again, kicking off the year here. It's sort of that time of the year where analysts and influencers sort of highlight, some of the bigger trends going on in our industry. And some of you may have seen, over the last several weeks, reports from folks like Oliver Wyman and Aite and Cerulli, all really highlighting the value of data. And I think Aite even going as far as stating that data is the new oil. And I don't necessarily disagree. Each highlighting also the acceleration, that's happening in our space towards an as-a-service model. Which really supports the rapid development and greater control over those digital experiences. So at Bridge, our focus is really to do the same, to empower wealth management technology with our recently launched WealthTech API. So for folks who aren't familiar with BridgeFT, we are a wealth infrastructure company powering a number of leading financial institutions, FinTechs, financial advisors, and even TAMPs to deliver better outcomes for their clients. Our technology is modern, cloud native, and completely API first, helping firms and clients deliver truly personalized experiences and next generation apps. So Most recently, what I really love to highlight here is most recently, if you haven't seen it, we launched what we believe to be the industry's first WealthTech as a service platform. Our WealthTech API offers a single API connection to a host of critical services, including trade-ready multi-custodial data, advanced analytics and calculations, and headless application services that allow folks like yourself to embed investment infrastructure, things like performance reporting, fee billing, into your own experiences without all the sort of core functionality and data infrastructure costs that typically come along with the build out of those types of applications as well. Just to sort of illustrate that a little bit here, this is I joke it's kind of our spider graphic, but this just gives you a sense of sort of the capabilities of the platform. It all starts with the data. Our data aggregation engine offers direct connections to all the major custodians and back office providers, TD, Schwab, Fidelity, Pershing. We've recently added Apex, Shareholder Services Group, Interactive Brokers, DST for annuities and insurance data, Plaid for held away assets, Eaglebrook and Gemini for digital assets, and hundreds more. Really, the data is the core of our solutions. And we've built a number of sort of automated processes to aggregate, normalize, and enrich that data. Really providing our clients accurate, timely, and trade-rating data all through a single API. And this, graphic here really is to illustrate the idea of that data and the services available to you all to help accelerate development. With the idea of you write once to our single API to unlock all of those critical data elements, all the application building blocks in order to support the unique sort of experiences that you want to make available to your clients.
Yeah, thanks so much for going through that, Dave. And super excited that later on today's call, like I mentioned, we will actually be going through specific scenarios and use cases that some of our clients have already deployed this successfully. So in the first portion, though, we're going to focus on discussing some of the key data integration challenges we do see FinTechs facing currently. Dave, would you kind of kick us off with some thoughts around that?
Yeah, happy to do it, and then I'll pass it over to Eric as well. I think most of us on this call are aware of some of the data challenge that exists across our industry. They've been around for years and really continue to to remain sort of challenges. A number of data aggregators have tried their best to help solve them, but when you start looking at the landscape, many of those providers remain often sort of expensive and costly. Built on old plumbing. Some of those providers have been around since the the mid and early 80s and 90s, and still similar sort of technology and architecture. Many of them offer little in regards to helping you differentiate your offerings with some of the challenges that come along with incomplete or just poor quality data. So in turn providers like yourselves have either tried to build your own custodial data integrations or had to rely on on these legacy providers. So it increases your costs, takes away from your time and resources devoted towards your core competency and the value that you provide to your clients. And I think we're here to offer some additional thoughts on how that process and those challenges can ultimately be resolved.
Yeah, Dave, I think one of the key points there with when you think about a legacy aggregation setup built years decades ago almost, right? It's built on a more traditional infrastructure, physical servers, data center, more traditional setup, and that becomes very costly and timely to sort of move right into something more modern. The game changer is more of a cloud native setup, which allows you to build things faster, much less expensive, and taking advantage of more scalable compute power. And so that's a real game changer today. So if somebody had to redo it, which you can't often do, that's typically the direction you'd see people go.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we get a little deeper here. But I think it's important to point out, not only sort of some of the challenges that we all recognize across the landscape, but there's a good deal of sort of overhead that comes with traditional methods. Each individual custodian, good or bad, has their own data format and processes, which ultimately leads to a tangled web of data files and FTP sites and batch processes that need to run at night that trigger other workflows and other things sort of downstream. Ultimately the challenges are, once you get that data and you can understand it and try and standardize it for your own use cases, firms that we typically interface with, ultimately have to find a place to store it. It's got to go in a database, opens up more risk for the firm in regards to cybersecurity and PII. On top of that, you need headcount. So I'm kind of quickly going through this here, but you can sort of see the checklist of things that as you're starting to think about these types of projects, the manpower, the costs, the time that goes into either doing this yourself, providing connectivity to these custodians, or relying on sort of a legacy provider. There's things that need to be considered as part of that. I think the last one is after you go through all that checklist of all of those things, you need a strategy for ultimately getting that data into your downstream applications. So what does that technology strategy look like? How do you get it there? How do you format it correctly so that you're able to present it the right way to your clients and deliver those experiences that you want to be able to do? Any of that, folks on the call, any of that sound familiar? Probably, a lot of folks are sort of shaking their head and saying, yep, I went through that, or yeah, those are things I need to consider. Eric, do you want to talk a little bit about sort of our, much different sort of approach to that?
Yeah, I mean, when I typically end up explaining this, right, I break the problem into sort of two parts, right? And sort of the way the slide is set up here. On the sort of first challenge or big problem is just getting the data in, right? There's a myriad of ways of doing it. It's FTP files coming in, which requires you to set up FTP drop zones and networking and batch processing, going through analysis and mapping and all of that just to get to the point of now being able to use it, right? And what you're really after is building some kind of an application, right, and using it upstream, and then time to market becomes important, and really just, so if I think of it as an iceberg, right, the tip of the iceberg that's above the water is really the API, the application, being able to start building your product, and everything below it is really that data ingestion process. And over time, you really become sort of the slave to the data. Right, and your ability to build product and move faster is really hampered by that. Add to that, legacy infrastructure, servers, right? And if you're a large enterprise, things move even more glacially, right? Being able to get one department to set up networking, FTP drop zones, and so your overall time to get anything done really just expands, right? But in a more modern approach, or if you think of it as wealth tech infrastructure using cloud native technology, you can make use of lots of technology that already handles mapping and ingestion. You don't really get into provisioning FTP servers the way you normally would. You can really focus on just building the product, right? And so with the WealthTech API, right, we've got all those custodial files coming in. We have all those ingestion routines set up, and really just by having one integration point with the API, you can get to building your application. You can get to building things, faster. And as additional custodians come on board behind the scene, they'll come out the same API. So you get to spend more time really just building product as opposed to being the slave to the data.
Yeah, I think you beg a really good point there, Eric, and I thought it was totally worth just kind of highlighting how easy and simple it is to get started based off our documentation.
Right. So yeah, to that point, when we think about product development teams, not just engineers, but even product owners, as they're trying to think about the application that they'd want to build and what's available, going out and looking at again, I go back to more modern API documentations that have recipes, blueprints, use cases set up. So as you're looking at things and saying, hey, we want to build a tax loss harvesting engine, right? How do I get at that data? How can I play with it and sample the data to see if this is even going to fit my use case, and try it in a very low cost model without having to go in and get all kinds of heavy infrastructure, but have a place or a sandbox to play to see if it's going to fit my use case. And then take that sample code, bring it into my application, try it and go on. So it becomes a very iterative process that's very low cost.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for going through that. So now that we discussed a little bit some of the challenges that we're seeing going on in the market, and sort of touched on some of those key issues, let's talk a little bit more specifically about what firms can do about this. So really the option is, to build an internal solution or to buy and work with an outsourced provider to accomplish this. Eric, did you have some sort of like initial thoughts or findings on this?
Right. So just sort of expanding upon some of the challenges, right? If you were to do, the build side, again, you've got two halves to really contend with. If you understand the product that you want to build and how you want to use the data, you end up having to first build out that data ingestion side, right? And that is going custodian by custodian and figuring out their files and bringing the files in and analyzing them and mapping them, and so to normalize into some common interface that you then can expose up to your application. The bigger challenge in an RIA space is when you're going through the recruiting process, continue to try to recruit RIAs and have them bring their book of business in. In order to bring them in, they're going to want to have, make sure that you've got all of their data from their respective custodians. And if you don't have that custodian, you have to go off and contact that custodian and go through that FTP process and the file process all over again in order to just even bring that RIA on board and get their assets with you. And so that becomes a very tricky thing because it takes time to bring all of these custodians in. But on the buy side, if you're using a vendor that has the APIs and you've already done an integration, right? The reality is they've continued to add these custodians behind the scene, right? And so the breadth of custodians available to you through a vendor allows you to bring that RIA on faster, get your application up faster. So your cost is much less. Your time to get to market is increased. You've got the expertise of within a vendor that regularly deals with custodial data, so you don't have to spend time trying to learn the new custodian and the nuances of their data and their files. And ultimately, control becomes, on the buy side, you can say, well, I'll have more control, but that can be a bit elusive because again, you become a slave to the data process. But on the buy side, while you might be giving up some control, ultimately what you're gaining is that expertise and time to market.
Yeah, I think, but just to add to that, Eric, I think the control one is a real important one and comes up a lot in folks that we're talking to across sort of the spectrum of different channels. And as folks are thinking about the types of experiences they want to build and manage for their their end clients, whether those are advisors, whether those are wholesalers, whether they're the end investors, it really comes down to how much control do you have of the data, the applications, and really the services that are driving calculations and presentations. That's really going to come down to vendor selection, which ties all into all the things you said in regards to cost, expertise, and time. How do you simplify that? How do you find not only a modern sort of technology to do it, but you have all the overhead that comes along with it. Every time you bring on a new advisor, or every time you need a new data source, there's a whole sort of onboarding process that goes along with that. There's lots of paperwork, there's lots of workflows behind the scenes, understand those custodians, and really the breadth and quality of that data as well are sort of big sort of drivers in our conversations with folks across the industry.
Yeah, it's a steep learning curve.
100%. Totally agree.
Absolutely. Well, thank you guys so much for kind of going through the pros and cons in terms of that. I think that transitions really nicely into the next section, which we're going to specifically talk through how some financial technology companies are already using the cloud-based API to deploy custom solutions. Dave, would you kick us off with some client examples?
Yeah, happy to give some examples here, and we can talk deeper on some of these as well. I think ultimately, what we've seen in a number of different scenarios is really, providing some level of I'll call it sort of inspiration of how to put the WealthTech API, to use, right? So there's a sort of a standard use case that we do for all day long for a number of our clients, which is we're primarily serving the need of a single point of integration for client account data across multiple custodians. So we talked about some of the challenges with legacy data files and infrastructure that comes along with that. Providing a single sort of direct access via an API to balances, positions, tax lots, transactions, cash activity, performance calculations, and more. All of that data and being able to bring it together. There's some extra layers of sort of servicing on top of that data that we provide as well. So being able to normalize it, transaction codes, tax lot level detail, trading activity that goes on behind the scenes, reconciling that, and then ultimately being able to support all different types of scenarios, from simple use cases to bring data into for portfolio analytics or financial planning type applications to some of the most complex trading scenarios as well. So this whole idea of kind of build once to our APIs and access many sources is really kind of foundational to to how we support clients as well. The second one there is really unique, and I think we're seeing more and more of this, across the wealth management space, particularly for advisors and even asset managers, looking to dig sort of deeper, not only into the data, but providing more analytics and insights into what is going on across a practice, a book of business, across distribution. So we have clients that we're working with today who are using our aggregation engine to drive things like next best action analysis. They're feeding the data to support selling scenarios. We're actually seeing quite a bit of this in the asset management space as firms move more towards this digital wholesaler model. How do you integrate and engage advisors to drive more distribution, and digital being a primary there? Another example is we're working with a fintech right now who's using capabilities and analytics via the API to drive deeper insights for practice management. How do I improve and teach and provide better visibility of what's going on across my book, and drive development tools, drive servicing initiatives of how to better sort of standardize across a network of advisors or a network of sort of distribution on sort of different ways to provide new selling opportunities or new servicing opportunities across those engagements as well. Just two sort of examples. Eric, I know you have a couple as well.
Right. So the third one, sort of these three sort of go across the entire portfolio, and the ability to use our API and pull in things aggregated across custodians allows them to look across the entire portfolio, pull the data in, and then offer some trade ideas. So we've seen some clients offering trade ideas where, yes, you could do that on an account, but to be able to do that across an entire portfolio that are aggregated from different custodians, whether held away, is one interesting idea. Portfolio customization is one that we came across, Dave, that I thought was pretty interesting, in that when sitting down with a client, they've been, or our client's been able to show their customer different ideas for portfolios allocation, right? So here's your account with this allocation, here's your account with a different allocation, asset allocation breakdown. But by pulling in data from across all the custodians, they've been able to actually show them a live working model of, this is what your account looks like right now on with this asset allocation. But if we put you into a different asset allocation model, this is actually what it would look like if we executed on it. And that's by using live data from the account to show them that the before and the after, and that's helped them in the sales process of saying, okay, let's shift my account over to this different asset allocation model, and then from there they can execute trades. So that was a pretty interesting idea that we've seen, as well as good old-fashioned tax loss harvesting. But the difference being they can do it across an entire portfolio of accounts that are coming from different custodians.
And Eric, just to add to that, I think what we're seeing a lot from customers is, as they evolve sort of those experiences, particularly around portfolio customization, recommendation engines, direct indexing, the idea of, previously a lot of it was sort of a snapshot in time. Here's what the portfolio looks like today. Let me make some recommendations of what it could look like with some hypotheticals sort of wrapped around it. Through some of the API sort of connectivity, not only is it sort of on demand or sort of real time views of what the client may hold today, but there's an opportunity really to extend that to sort of ongoing management. How does that portfolio evolve with certain trades, with market conditions, particularly in the environment that we're in today? And you can start to really be more proactive, both in what an advisor can provide to their clients, but even, we have firms who are using our data in a client portal scenario where clients can log in, see that data no different than their advisors are, and make, ultimate decisions on their investments downstream as well.
That's right.
But one other one I'll add here on sort of that right-hand column is, we have a number of clients who play in the compliance, oversight and really the trade surveillance space as well. And one client in particular, actually a couple, we're really always looking to sort of expand services and reach a broader audience of RAs. Big span of RAs across an AUM sort of spectrum, and their core solution really initially required a good deal of manual data entry. They had some file upload capabilities, a lot of folks do, but their engagement with us was really around how can they quickly gain sort of direct access to custodial data. How can they do that in a simple, cost-effective way, while also adding not only custodians, but a service like Plaid, where you can get held away assets, bank account information, credit cards, loans, on top of sort of the traditional sort of investment assets that come along with it. So with us, they we work with them directly. They not only built in a matter of weeks sort of a direct connection to the APIs to get that data pulled in, but did that at a fraction of the cost for sure. If they were to go build it themselves or even take on the work. I think the other added benefit or part of the engagement was, and we do this for a lot of our clients, is our client success team tends to work directly with our customers to help them reduce sort of the operational burden that comes along with data onboarding, managing the paperwork with each of the custodians. They all have their own workflows around ROIs and release of information and data that needs to be signed or digitally submitted. And being able to manage G numbers and rep codes, we tend to take that burden on as we support our customers as well. So ultimately, for this customer, it improved not only the experience they were able to provide their clients, because now it's sort of free data flow versus sort of manual data entry type stuff, but it increased their core set of capabilities. So it went from just sort of standard compliance oversight to to more on-demand trade analysis, real-time alerts, things that were changing across their practice, and opens up sort of new growth opportunities for them as well. So again, just another sample of how to put some of the capabilities to use.
This next one, embedding headless applications to extend feature capabilities. So that's a bit
almost sounds scary.
Yeah, it's a bit of a mouthful, but what this really represents is, so when we think about the APIs, so I typically will describe it as there's sort of a core set of APIs that that's the balances, positions, unrealized, realized gain loss, and those are sort of the data services, and we'll often use the analogy of Shopify, right? So if you were trying to build an e-commerce store, you need inventory management, you need order management, you need payment gateways. You can use all of those, you can use some of those. It all depends on the application you're building. So when we compare that to sort of the WealthTech API stack, you've got your basic core data services, but you also have other things to deal with, which some of the more utility-based services for managing households or managing models in asset classes. And then you've got billing engines and you've got performance reporting engines. And so we've got a number of clients that, maybe startup to mid-level firms while they're using the core data services. It's just not really within their wheelhouse right now, especially, trying to get out to market to build a billing engine. That can be fairly complicated, or performance reporting engine. So by plugging into our headless applications, so there's no UI, there's no front end, but these are just pure API driven billing engines and reporting performance reporting engines. They've been able to bring that capability onto their platform very quickly without having to go through the complexity of building out such complicated applications. And then the last one I think is pretty cool, in that we've got a client that built a two-sided RIA marketplace. And so they're as a startup, they basically built a platform that matches customers with RIAs. So the RIAs are basically signing onto their platform and making their services available, but taking advantage of the platform's billing engine, performance reporting, balances, positions, and the customers come and they get to go search through the marketplace and try to find the advisor that best fits their personality, their style. And the platform, right, uses our APIs both to power the data, but as well as using the APIs to manage based on the AUM for a given advisor that they've matched with a customer. They charge a platform fee that's on a sliding scale based on the AUM. So they've come up with some interesting ideas of how to use our APIs to build a two-sided marketplace for advisors.
Great. Thanks so much for going through those different use cases and scenarios, guys. And I did see that we started to get some questions coming in, so we will circle back on those soon. Everyone feel free to take advantage of that questions tool we have off to the right-hand side there on your screen. And Dave, I wanted to turn it back over to yourself to talk a little bit about how BridgeFT, our WealthTech API, is currently powering the technology of several notable companies in the space.
Yeah, I figured. Thanks, Carolyn. I figured I would share this for folks on the line. Lots of sort of recognizable logos and names that you may be familiar with in regards to the wealth management sort of landscape. Across FinTechs, across TAMPs, private banks. We service and support hundreds of RIAs as well across our core platform. But I think to Eric's point on the last slide, as we were going through some of the use cases, our intent is really to be a true enabler or an accelerator from a technology perspective. So rather than building core functionality, things that are really become sort of industry foundational utilities, Monte Carlo engines, performance engines, billing engines, things that sort of power the underlying sort of pipes or infrastructure. We're building and have supported clients in helping them piece together those sort of building blocks or puzzle pieces to build their own unique sort of interfaces or experiences. Data being a core, the next set of sort of what you do with that data and sort of driving it to build unique investment solutions, expand functionality that you may have today where you want to enter new areas of the market, or just bring ideas to life sort of faster. And that's really our intent as we continue to build and support our wealth infrastructure set of capabilities. So more sample here. Happy to share sort of deeper use cases or others that may be relevant to areas of focus for folks on the call as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And Eric, I wanted to turn it back over to you just to maybe highlight a few notable standout parts of the API.
All right, so this is just sort of summing up a lot of the main points that we were making throughout this webinar. But as Dave mentioned, the WealthTech API was really developed to be API first platform. So always thinking about the developers, the product team, what you're trying to build, and thinking about the interface so that you can spend time building product, right? As opposed to being more data driven and data first, right? And really spending time on the quality of the data. Again, those are some of the challenges when building out an ingestion pipeline and looking at the quality of the data coming through and going through a normalization process to make sure that what's coming out is high quality and clean, again, so that you can spend time building the application and not having to be a slave to the data. Let somebody else worry about it. single integration, many sources is really the biggest point that I could make here. You know, you write first against the WealthTech API, and then as additional custodians come onto the platform, they come out that same interface. You shouldn't have to worry about continue to do multiple integrations against multiple sources, again, to keep you guys building products first. And ultimately,
Awesome.
yeah, I was just going to go through the last three quick. Ultimately, you have a lower total cost of ownership. You know, again, the data side tends to be the most expensive side. So if you're just worrying about the API, again, you're back to building products and getting out to market fast. And then we talk about going, you know, being by developers for developers, and I really expand that a little bit wider to talk about your overall product team. Because you know, product owners and developers that are tasked with trying to, you know, build applications have a lot to contend with, and the data becomes the challenge. And so if they don't have to worry about the data, they can spend time worrying about building unique products for your clients and customers. That's it.
Got it. Yeah. Thanks so much, Eric. Really appreciate that. So I know we obviously covered a ton in today's session, and like very, very impressive how much we got through in the past 30 minutes together. So we do have some questions that came in, so I definitely want to make sure we get to those. First question that I see popping up is, are you also capable of receiving fund administrator streams for hedge fund and private capital firms? Dave or Eric, I'm not sure who wants to tackle that.
Eric, I'm happy to start, and you can probably fill in the blanks on this. So from our capabilities today, we have, you know, as I said, sort of direct connections to all the major custodians and back office providers, sort of the standard, you know, sort of names that are there. You know, we're happy to work with folks if you know, if there's specific data sets or connections or even proprietary data sets that folks have that we may not have in our roster of sort of sources. So it really comes down to, you know, the types of products, the types of sort of data sources related to those fund administrators, and also you know, specific sort of use cases related to those connections as well.
Yeah, I mean, from a technical perspective, right, or data perspective, what we really will look for is, do they have sort of the complement of set of data files or sources that we would need, you know, in terms of positions and balances and lots. And so, you know, there's some defined, you know, entities that we look for and require from custodians to basically bring in, so that we have the full complement of data coming out, so it works across all the custodians, right? Can we get positions from everybody, transactions from everybody? So with that, when we go for custodian, we just match up against all the data entities that they have. But yes, we could do that.
Yeah, and if it's not on our, what I'll add to that though is, if it's not on our list today, you know, it typically takes us, after we go through that process that Eric just outlined, you know, anywhere from, you know, 3 to 4 weeks to set up a new feed. As an example, you know, we added Apex in a matter of sort of weeks as a new custodian on our platform in support of a handful of clients that went live on that custodian as well.
Got it. Thank you guys so much for covering that. Next question that I see coming in from the audience. Can you view both your client data as well as anonymized data across custodians? Thoughts? I don't know if I'm butchering that, anonymized. So
Yeah,
you guys get what I'm saying.
I have a follow-up question of what is meant by anonymized.
Yeah,
so Eric, one thought there is, and we could use our own sort of in-house and even our development sandbox. So, you know, the idea that, you know, taking sort of core data that we get from multiple sources, and even for our own development sandbox, you know, we do quite a bit of sort of scrubbing and cleanup to anonymize, you know, specific data scenarios. So, you know, one, you get the core data and all the foundational normalization and reconciliation that comes along with what we provide from a connectivity perspective. But, you know, the added piece, if there's a scenario or a use case, you know, that's required around, you know, anonymizing the data, you know, we do that for ourselves today. related to our our own development sandbox that we make available to to folks who want to play around and sort of start building on the application. So definitely something we can explore. We have the capability to be just really understanding sort of the use case.
Got it. Okay, great. And I do see one more. Yeah, this is just a clarification point. So the anonymized data would be data that the firm doesn't have access to since they may or may not be our client. We would normally not see other client transactions if we aren't their advisor. So that's definitely something that could be covered off on, on like a one-off conversation. Don't you think, Dave?
Yeah, totally. We can dig in a little deeper there. There's a couple different scenarios to work through in regards to sort of sub-advised relationships versus distribution relationships, and how just generally that relationship model is set up between a firm, an advisor, and the custodian. But yeah, happy to dive in a little deeper potentially offline on that one.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that transitions perfectly just kind of into our wrap up here. So we did cover a lot of information. Obviously, I think in most cases, it really warrants sort of a personal conversation to determine the organization's goals and how we could partner together to help you achieve them. Definitely encourage people to visit our website to learn more about our offering or just get directly in touch with us for next steps. Dave or Eric, I would turn it back over to you guys for any closing thoughts.
I think for me, again, just to sort of hit on the key points here is, one, thank you everybody for taking the time. I know it's middle of the day on a Tuesday at the end of the month, so always appreciate everybody taking the time here. We're available to answer questions. We went through a lot today in regards to capabilities and what we're bringing to market here, and even sort of samples of how we're helping firms really power some of those unique experiences. So as you're thinking about your execution and where you want to go from a capabilities perspective, we're here to work through those scenarios. Eric is a really good point on supporting use cases and finding the right APIs that you need to develop those those specific experiences that you may have as well. So again, appreciate everybody taking the time today, and thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. I'd be more than happy to talk with any of you about your use cases or your thoughts of what APIs we have that might fit some of those solutions or help you craft a solution.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys. Well, thank you so much, Eric and Dave, for presenting, and thanks everyone for joining us. We look forward to hosting you for future sessions. Have a great day.
Yeah.
Thank you.